Good morning. Nice to see you. Am I on? Yeah? Hey, there we go. So once a year, usually about May, I get a respiratory infection, and then I end up with a cough for a couple of weeks. If you've been here for any length of time, you know the drill. And then I cough my way through a message, and that's today. So I was sick 2.5 weeks ago. It's still hanging out. If you're scared, you don't have to be. This is just what's happening. I have a cough drop stuffed into my cheek. You didn't know you were sitting in the splash zone today. I apologize. And we're going to make our way through this. So it's going to be great. You know, one of my favorite things to do in the winter is to go skiing. I always laugh because my two favorite hobbies are free diving and downhill skiing. And I live in the Sonoran Desert, which is a conundrum. I'm not an amazing skier, but I've had this goal. And here's why. It was a couple of years ago. Actually, it was a while ago at this point, probably a decade ago. I was skiing up in Flagstaff, up in Snowball, and at their ski area. And as I'm going down the hill, I went a little quicker than I'd ever gone before, and I found myself hitting 50 miles an hour. And I got to the bottom, and I thought, that was the most fun I think I've ever had skiing. And then I thought, if that's what 50 feels like, this thing popped into my head where I was like, what does 60 feel like, right? And I was like, it's got to be more fun. Like, that's definitely the way that's going to work. It's got to be more fun. And from that moment, I've just had this like weird goal that's become almost like a weird passion in me, where in one of our mountains, because don't get me wrong, like a double black diamond, if you're a skier, you'd understand. In Colorado, I could go do that. But in Arizona, we don't always have those type of runs. And so I was like, I'm going to hit 60 miles an hour here. And that I'm not going to do it just like squatting down and kamikazing down the hill. That's dangerous. I'm a dad of 2 and my kids don't need that, right? So what I am going to do is try to do it cleanly and with good skiing and good form and all this stuff. I want to try to do that. So I have been trying to the degree that my watch will track my miles per hour. And I got to 59.8. And I know what some of you are thinking. You guys are like, that's 60 miles an hour. But it didn't start with a 6. And so we have a problem. Do you see what I'm saying? And so I'm still after this. I'm like, but I'm gonna officially hit this. Like, I'm gonna try to do this. And so it's been like a passion. It's been a goal of mine that I want to do it. And so I went up to Snowball a few years ago, 2 years ago now. And I just thought, today's the day. I'm going to make this happen. And there's one run, it goes all the way to the top, and you can go all the way to the bottom. And that's going to give you about enough time that you can pick up the kind of speed that I'm after. Where by the bottom, by the time I get there, maybe I'll hit this once I'll hit 60 miles an hour. And so I think, okay, let's do it. And so I go. And I'm doing great at the top part of this. It's going great. And I feel like I'm like right around 55. That's what it feels like to me. And then I go into the second piece of this and continue on. And I can tell I'm like getting close to 60 miles an hour. And right as I get to where I'm going to go into the third part, I'm like, this is my moment. I'm going to do it. I come over this hill where I'm going to drop back down. And now there's like a lip. And I've skied this hill so many times before, but I never went over this moment this fast. And so what ended up happening was where normally I would ski and go down, I skied and just shot off the hill, like through the air. And I wasn't ready for any of that at like 58 miles an hour. And so I hit it sideways on accident, like not squared up. And my legs were no longer underneath me as I watched my skis come out in front of me. You never want to see that when you're in the air going really fast, right? That's not what you're looking for. And suddenly I just slammed down into the hill and my skis hit. And it just left me going end over end. And every time I'd go end over end, my helmet would slam into the snow again. That's how I knew what direction was up and down, is because that one's clearly down, right? And my shoulder popped, and that felt not great. It hurt. And then I got like a solid bruise on my hip, and I'm just hitting. And then finally I bring myself to a stop after 40, 50 yards of just, somersaulting down this hill. And it hurt. It was a pretty bad fall. I don't think I've had a fall quite like this particular fall. In fact, I know I never have. Like, this was the fall for me. It was a really big one. And I've got snow everywhere. Everything hurts. I'm trying to figure out like what's up, what's down. And the very first question I'm asking, like, is anything broken? Am I okay? Like what's going on? And so I'm just sitting there and I decide, okay, I probably need to get up. And this snowboarder had seen the whole thing. There was like one other person on this hill because I wanted it to be empty. And so there's only one other person and they'd seen the whole thing. And he just comes snowboarding up to me and he stops next to me and he goes, "Hey man, you okay?" And I said, yeah, I think so. I took a pretty good fall. And he was like, yeah. And he laughed. And he was like, I'm out here all the time. And that was top 3 for the season for sure. I was really embarrassed. Where I was like, yeah, well, you win some, you lose some. I don't know. Like, I didn't know what to say. And I'm embarrassed, so I'm like, I need to leave now. I have an audience. I'm going to get up. And so I start getting up, and I just feel this hand on my shoulder, and it's him. And he just pushes me back down. He goes, why don't you just sit down there for a minute and just take in the situation and make sure you're okay. And I just sat here. And this weird like guardian angel of a snowboarder on the random mountain that day sits down next to me, and he's like, it's okay. I'll sit with you. And I was like, you don't have to do that. And he pulls out a cigarette and lights it. And he goes, I'm not going anywhere. And just sits there next to me. And I was just like, okay, this is what we're doing now. And I started to think, like, am I hurt? Am I okay? Is this okay? And I sat there for just a little bit. And I finally looked over at him, and I was just like, I think I'm good. I'm going to go now. And he was like, okay, cool. And then he just looked at me and he was like, I hope you have a better day. And I was like, yeah, thanks. And I just went down the mountain. And as I went my way back down the mountain, I was skidding and awkward because everything hurt and it felt out of whack and it felt out of sorts. And I just was like, man, that was crazy. One of the people I'd gone skiing with heard about my fall and they said, oh man, you were so close. Are you going to try again? And I looked at them and I said, no, that's what I said. And the reason why is because the passion that was in me, like the energy and this goal and all of this stuff, it was not there in that moment. Like it had just gone. I suddenly found myself going like, I don't think I want to fall that hard again. I don't think I want that to happen again. Like my hip hurts, my shoulder hurts, everything kind of hurts. And I hope I didn't get concussed or anything. Like, I don't think I'm going to do it again. And so I looked and I said, not today, maybe tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow is what I said. That began the beginning of 1 year where I stopped doing something I love the way that I love to do it because I finally knew what it was like to fall that hard and to feel the pain that comes from it. And I found myself going, I know what it's like to fail, and I know what it's like to fall, and I know what it feels like. I don't know if I'm going to be doing this again anytime soon. See, friends, I know I'm talking about skiing, and I know not everybody skis. We live in the desert, so certainly not everybody here skis. But I wonder, have you ever had a moment in your life where you had a goal or a passion or something that was really important to you? It could be a relationship. It could be a whole host of things. And you failed at whatever that important thing was that you cared about. Or maybe you didn't fail, but the thing that you cared about fails. And then afterwards, there's this kind of pain and fear and hardship that comes from it. Right? Have you ever had that moment? You don't have to be a skier to kind of know what I'm illustrating here today. See, here's what I want to talk about. I think that one of the hardest moments in life isn't just when we fail or when something that we care about fails. That's hard. I'm not minimizing that. But I think one of the hardest moments is what happens immediately after that. When suddenly we still have to figure out how to live a life. When suddenly we still have to figure out how to get back up and get on our skis again, so to speak. I think that's one of the hardest things that we face in different times. And I want to talk about some of that today. Let me ask you this question just to think about it for you. How many of you remember the first time that you had your heart broken in a dating relationship? Do you remember that first time? Here's what I'm going to guess, because I've talked to a lot of people through these situations at this point, and here's what I'm going to guess. The very first relationship you ever had like that, you went in vulnerable and open-hearted because you didn't know any better. And you cared, and it felt amazing until it didn't. And the first time you felt that sense of heartbreak, you felt a real, genuine loss inside of you. You felt a real, genuine heartbreak that you hadn't felt before. And how many of us in that particular moment suddenly was like, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to feel that way again. I don't want to step into that way again. And so then you changed something. You started saying, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to step into whatever I step into now, just not as vulnerable. I'm going to actually anticipate failure. I'm going to anticipate that something's going to end or break or hurt because I want to prepare myself for it, to protect myself from that moment. I'm going to defend against it. Some of us have even found ourselves going, I'm not going to open myself up to be close enough to anyone that's going to hurt me that way again, because you know what it's like to fall and to fail. And you know what that pain can feel like, and you're like, I don't want to feel this way again. And so you start to reorient your life to it. How many of you ever put yourself out there at work in a moment? Maybe there was an opportunity to step into. You had an idea you wanted to suggest, or maybe there was some team you got to lead. And you're like, I'm going to do this. I care about this. I'm passionate about this. I want this. And you took that thing you wanted and you stepped into it, and then you got shot down by your boss. Or all of a sudden people just didn't like it. You got dismissed for something in that particular moment. Or maybe even you got to a spot where the opportunity failed, it didn't work, or the team didn't coalesce and it kind of fell apart or was at each other and didn't actually form and work together. And you felt what it was like in that particular moment to put yourself out there and then to feel what it's like to fail and to fall. And then you go, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna just sit at my desk or wherever it is that you are. I'm gonna keep my head down. I'm not putting myself out there like that again. I'm gonna avoid it because I don't like the way that feels and I don't wanna feel that way again. Or how many of you have tried to follow God at some point in your life because you felt like God was leading you or moving you, and then you tried and it didn't work? Or you failed. Or the thing that you cared about failed. And it kind of hurt you. You didn't like how that felt, and maybe you got embarrassed. And it just felt weird, uncomfortable and weird, and you found yourself going, I don't want to feel that way again. And now whenever it feels like God might be leading you, tugging at you, or guiding you in a certain direction, you close yourself off to it because you want to avoid that. Keep your head down. Keep your relationship at a distance. Close yourself off. And the reason why is not because you're like, I hate possibilities. It's because you don't want to feel that pain again. It's because you don't want to go through that moment again. See, in each of those, it's the same reason. When we care about something and we fail at it, or the thing we care about fails, it hurts, right? It creates pain, hardship, embarrassment, you name the emotion that it creates for you. And it's easy suddenly to get stuck living in an avoidant life or feeling stuck in a life that isn't like living at all in that moment because I don't want to be hurt. After all, nobody wants to feel that way again, unless you're a masochist, right? That's it. Like most of us are not out there going, I would love a little bit more of that pain in my life. This is not how we're wired. We want to avoid that thing. You know, there's a story in the book of Judges about a man named Gideon. And whenever we talk about Gideon, he's this amazing character where everyone's like, he's this amazing warrior and he's this amazing, like, brave person. We always talk about Gideon as a story of courage. And I always wonder, have you read chapter 6? Have you read the intro to Gideon? Because Gideon's story ends up with this kind of amazing story in the book of Judges with courage and all this stuff, but that's not how it starts in chapter 6. In chapter 6, it feels very familiar to a lot of the things that we're actually talking about today. And so I want to walk through this week. We're just going to look at the beginning of his story, and then Seth, I believe, is going to teach next week, and he'll come in and pick up on some of the rest of his story, so stay tuned for that. But let's jump in. Judges chapter 6, verse 2. It says this, in the hand of Midian overpowered Israel. The Midianites are a people group, right? So they're a people group in that ancient land, and they overpower the Israelites. It says, because of the Midian, the people of Israel made for themselves the dens that are in the mountains and the caves and the strongholds. Isn't that a weird sentence? Here's what's happening. Let me explain this. The Israelites have something really important that they're doing. They're becoming a people who are no longer nomadic and traveling around, which means they have a land for themselves. This is a big deal in human development. They have a land for themselves. They're going to get to plant crops, which means they get to grow and harvest resources, which means they get to keep the abundance of that so that they can weather droughts and famines. They get to build an economy and take care of each other. This is like a big, big step for them, and this is the place that they're at. And so they do. They settle in and they start planting crops and they start having livestock and they start building security and a little bit of wealth and a little bit of opportunity to live beyond just the moment in these things. And as a community, they begin to grow. And this is what they're passionate about. But there's another group of people, and their name is the Midianites. And they are also a really large community of people, but they look and they go, you know what we could do? We're a bigger, stronger force. We could actually come in and just watch the harvest. See, when all their crops have grown and everything's about to be harvested and ready, we'll just come in and by force we can take what we want. And then we'll have the things that we want. We'll get our security and things that way. And that's what Midian ultimately does. I want you to imagine being a people with a deep care like this, where you're like, this is about the well-being for my family. This is about our livelihood and our sustenance, but this is also about our future and generations. Like, this is such an important thing. And so you plant your crops. And you cultivate your livestock. You do all of the things that you need to do. And then you're getting to the point of harvest season and you look up and you see this. Judges chapter 6, verse 3. For whenever the Israelites planted crops, the Midianites and the Amalekites and the people of the east would come up against them. They would encamp against them and devour the produce of the land as far as Gaza and leave no sustenance in Israel, no sheep or ox or donkey. They would come up with their livestock and their tents. And then, guys, if you're imagining this, this is what you would see. They would come like locusts in number. Both they and their camels could not be counted, so that they laid waste to the land as they came in. So your enemies, you look up and you're ready for this dream to happen. You're ready for the first step in this phase and in this moment. And you're about to reap the benefits of this. And you suddenly look up and you see your enemies swarming in like locusts to take all of these things. What do? Think about it. In that particular moment, this is your dream. This is what you've been working towards. It's for you. It's for your family. It's for your community. What do you think you do that first time when you look up and you're like, they're coming in to take all of this? Do you let them? No, I guarantee you're not like, it's cool, just take it. We didn't really care about it. It's fine. You fight. You would have fought. You would have said, no, you can't just take this. You can't just have this. You can't, like, this is important to us. And then imagine that they do take it and you fail. And you lose what mattered to you. And they go marching off with your crops. And they go marching off with your livestock. And they march off with your livelihood and everything else. And then you're like, okay, we got to recenter, regroup. Let's plant again, right? Because the dream is alive. Like, let's keep going here. We got to make this happen. So you plant again. And then they come again. Do you know what would have happened that second time? Some of you would have fought. And you would have been like, no, we can't let this happen again. The first time was terrible. We can't do this. We need to stand up and fight against this. Some of you would go, what's changed between now and the first time? Why bother trying right now? Do you know what would happen the third time? Guys, by the time we read this particular passage, this has happened enough. We're not told how many times, but it's happened enough that now verse 2 tells us that the Israelites have chosen to hide in the caves and the mountains and the strongholds that were hard to get to when the Midianites would come. The people wanted to build a life, reap a harvest, had things they cared about. They planted their time, their energy, their resources, all of this stuff to better themselves and the people that they ultimately care about. And then they fail. They lose a battle. They lose a moment. The thing they really care about falls apart in front of them. And eventually they get to the spot where they would rather spend their time during that season living in a cave, living in dens, living in strongholds in the cliffs while the Midianites take everything else than being back down there and facing the pain and the failure again. Facing that hard moment. Again, you see, friends, more often than not, after failure, fear takes root. Right now, all of a sudden, they've failed at something, and now they're stuck in this spot, and they're scared. Like, well, the Midianites are going to come again, and they're going to take everything that we have, and this isn't going to work. And so they're living their lives hiding in a cave. You know, after I took that fall trying to ski fast, I didn't quit skiing altogether. I still had a ski pass, and I still had people to go with and things. And so I went skiing. I just skied really differently. And here's what I started doing. I started just leaning back all the time. Now, if any of you have ever skied before, the way that you stop, when you want to stop yourself when you're skiing, normally you've got a bunch of forward momentum, so you kind of skid your skis out and you push and you're leaning back and that scrapes and you stop yourself. That's how you do this. So when you're leaning back on a hill, instinctively always, what are you actually doing? You're going, I'm always ready to stop. I'm always putting on the brakes. I'm always making sure that just in case I think I'm going to fall, I can skid to a stop. I'm not really skiing forward anymore. Now I'm just going down the mountain trying not to fall. That's not as fun. And it's not even something that I actually enjoyed. It felt really weird and it felt awkward. It's like I'd lost my center of gravity because you're supposed to stand centered in your boots. You're supposed to have your center of gravity, and now I'm leaning back. Do you think that made me fall more or less? I began to fall a lot more, and then I'd be like, see, I fall more, and this is what happens, and I need to protect myself more. And there was suddenly this fear inside of me that hadn't existed before, where before it was just joy and like, we can do this and let's see what happens. And all of a sudden there's this weird fear. And I'm actually fighting against the mountain. That's what I call that when you're always leaning back. You're fighting against the mountain. Have you ever been hiking with somebody and something gets a little bit steeper and you find that they're a little scared that they're gonna fall, and so you lose your center of gravity and you start leaning back and you're trying to hike? What happens to that person? Their feet usually start to slip a little bit more because your body isn't designed to be leaning back and taking all kinds of steps. Your body's designed to be over your center of gravity, not protecting yourself and fighting against the mountain itself. Some of you are like, I don't hike, I don't ski. Have you ever seen a little kid ride a bike? And they're doing an amazing job, and then all of a sudden they fall, and the next time they get on the bike, they're wobbly, and it's like all of a sudden they've lost their center of gravity because they're so worried about falling again, because no one wants that pain. Nobody wants to feel what that feels like, and so they're overcompensating and protecting, and it actually predisposes you to fall more. Friends, can I ask you a question? What was the fall that you took in your life? that made you lose your center of gravity? When you think about your own life and you think about the things that matter to you and that thing that was in front of you, whatever, what was the fall that you took that suddenly you were like, and it's like it knocked me off center, and now I'm always bracing for a fall. Now I'm always protecting myself in the anticipation that something's going to go wrong. Now, instead of just centering myself in this thing, I'm fighting against life itself. I'm always pushing on this thing because it's like I've gotten used to this idea that instead of living life, I'm just going to try not to fall in life. And I'm fighting against the mountain. For you, was it in a relationship that ended and you got hurt? Maybe it was a marriage. And there's this moment where you look and you're like, this was really, really important to me. But it failed. Sometimes I feel like I failed in it. And you find yourself thinking, you know what, I'm just bracing myself for everything now. It's like I've lost my confidence because now there's this fear that's inside of me. And you recognize and it's just running my life now. Was it in a relationship that went south? And you thought to yourself, you know what, I don't like the way that felt. I'm going to close myself off from trusting somebody that way again. I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to fight against this. I'm going to lean back instead of leaning forward because you've lost your center of gravity somehow. You know, maybe for you it was even with religion and growing up, and there was a part where it's like, this is supposed to be good for you. This is supposed to help you. This is supposed to be an amazing thing. And then you got into it and it hurt you. And it was not good for you. In fact, it made you scared and it judged you and it labeled you and it did a whole bunch of other things. And all of a sudden you felt what that felt like and you felt the pain of that thing. And now there's a part of you. And you might even be here today in a church, but you're going like, I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm leaning back. Because there's a tension inside of me now. There's a fear inside of me. And I don't want to feel that way. Again, maybe it was your job. Maybe it's you as a parent. Maybe it's you as a kid with your parents. I don't know what it was. Excuse me, but that moment's hard. And those moments, they knock us off center. And if you're leaning back in your life and you don't know what to do with that, because now it feels like you're stuck living inside of a cave in avoidance instead of actually living your life. Judges chapter 6, this is what happens with Israel. Israel was brought very low because of Midian. Isn't this where we end up in these moments? You hit a low point and you realize, some part of you suddenly gets to a space where you realize, this isn't living my life. This is just hiding from her. This isn't living my life. This is just me not wanting to step into things that are that could possibly hurt me because I don't want to feel that way again. And then here's what they do. It says, and the people of Israel cried out to help from the Lord. And I want to encourage you, if you're in a spot where you're like, there's this discontentment inside of me because I've gotten stuck in this space. I'm leaning back. I've lost my center of gravity, but I don't know what to do. I just don't like what it's doing to my life. I want to encourage you, talk to God about it. The first step, instead of just being stuck in that place, actually talk to God about it. What is the thing that you're actually afraid of? Don't judge yourself. Name it. Let it have a name. Tell God what it is. Trust Him with it and say, God, I need your help because I feel stuck here and I don't want to be stuck here. Can you lead me forward? Can you help me in this moment? I want to start with you. Start with what God wants to do in and through you. Talk to Him about it. Don't hold it secretive inside of you. Start processing that with Him. Trust Him. Pray to Him and ask Him for help. It's a moment. This might just be the beginning of you finding your courage and your way forward. Ask Him for help. Judges chapter 6, verse 11. The people ask God for help and God does something. Verse 11. Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, while his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. This is a really big moment. I know there's a lot of names that I just read, and that might be confusing without context, but here's the major point of that verse I just read. God sends an angel of the Lord, and he encounters a man named Gideon for the very first time, and this is a turning moment in the story. Can we pause and pay attention? Where did the angel of the Lord find Gideon when he came to him? What was he doing? It says he's processing wheat, right? He's processing wheat at a wine press. But beyond that, it tells us why he's doing it. What is he doing? So that he can hide it. Guys, do you see the irony of this? An angel of the Lord comes to Gideon and finds him in active hiding right now. And do you want to know what the angel of the Lord says to him? This is amazing. God sends the angel of the Lord. Here's what he says, chapter 6, verse 12. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, the Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor. The angel of the Lord finds Gideon who has been living in a cave during part of the year for fear of the Midianites, who is now processing wheat so that he can hide it, so that it doesn't all get stolen from him when he goes to hide from this, just like the rest of his people, finds him in the active process of hiding, looks at him and goes, "Hello there, Gideon, you mighty man of valor." Gideon's got to be going like, "Are you talking to me? Me? Right? Isn't that crazy? Doesn't it feel a little bit ironic?" But it's purposeful. Because after we fail at something that matters to us, we tend to lose sight of what we're really capable of, don't we? When you fail at something that matters to you, or something that really mattered to you fails, it can be easy for that particular moment to suddenly stand out in your brain, and you suddenly lose sight of what it is that you're actually capable of. We go from being a person who fails to being a failure, don't we? And we just kind of forget. We remember what didn't work. We remember what hurt. We remember what didn't happen. We remember what couldn't occur. And we forget all the things that did work, all the things that we do know, all the stuff that has happened, all the things that have led us to this moment. We become kind of tunnel visioned in this particular thing. And right from the beginning of the interaction, the angel of the Lord goes to Gideon and says, "Greetings, O mighty man of valor." Gideon, I want to remind you of what you're capable of. I want to remind you of the fact that you are actually mighty. You are strong. You have strength that you didn't even know about, Gideon. Gideon, you're actually a man of valor. You have bravery and you have courage. Gideon, you actually care in deep ways. You can do things. You can accomplish things, Gideon. This is how the angel of the Lord addresses him from that very moment. Gideon, you can get out of the wine press and get out of the cave, because there's something I want to do in you and through you. You are not a failure. You're just a person who's failed. You know, eventually I went skiing with people who've known me for a bit. And there's nothing extraordinary about this particular ski trip. I remember we were riding up to the mountain on one particular day. They know me pretty well. They were there when I went 59.8 miles an hour. They were on that trip, and they got to hear me rave about that and talk about those things. And so we're on our way up the mountain, and one of them looks at me and essentially is like, "So you're gonna carve today," which is a skiing term, and you're gonna go really fast and do all the things, and because they ski a little differently than me. And I said, "Yeah, I mean, I'd like to. That's the way I generally like to ski." And they're like, "What do you love about it? And what's the thing you like most? And what are you hoping for?" And there was weird. They just started to remind me of some of the trips and things that I've been on, some of the runs that I've done. I suddenly remembered, I've gone down like the hill 100 times plus and had an absolute blast. I'd made from top to bottom, skiing really, really fast, and just had a wonderful time. And I've done this so many times, and yet there's just like one moment that's ultimately stuck in my brain and stuck in my heart and creating fear. And it was like I'd forgotten everything I was capable of, because now I'm only capable of falling. Now I'm only capable of the one thing. And there was something about this conversation. Again, there was nothing particularly special about it, but they just started to remind me of what I'm capable of who I really am, and in a really beautiful way. And I found myself going up the mountain excited that day. I found myself feeling different about it than I had when I'd woken up. It felt like this was starting to move and starting to shift in me. And I was like, well, we'll see what happens. Let's see what can occur. Friends, can I ask you, have you let a failure in your life blind you to what it is that you're truly capable of? Has something failed in your life? Have you let a failure in your life? Maybe you actually failed, and now for some reason, you've forgotten that you're actually capable, and you've forgotten what it is that you're capable of. I mean, think about this. What if something failed in your workplace? Right? Something failed. But does that ultimately discount all of the hundreds of things that you did to even get to the place that you are now at in your workplace? Does that discount all of the growth that God has done in you, the journey that He's had you on, the learning, the pieces, the things that have all been stacked up and built in you, all the capability that exists in the person that you now are? You sitting here are the most capable version of yourself that has ever existed in this world. It's true. God has led you and brought you to so many spaces. What if something failed in your workplace? And it's one thing, it's not all of the things. And there's still this larger story. What if you failed at something recently as a parent, and you're like, I feel like I'm 'I'm such a failure. And you just have forgotten. that you actually kept somebody alive during a time that was not very easy. You lost all kinds of sleep. You learned how to reorient your schedule. You learned how to raise somebody up. You learned how to feed somebody, sacrifice things, do things. You built 1,000 steps, 1,000 growth moments, 1,000 things in your life that have led you to the spot that you're now in. And you might have failed as a parent in a moment, but does that discount the hundreds of things that have built all that competence and capability in you? That's your story. That's yours. What would happen if you remembered it? What would happen if you centered back in on it? There is a difference between failing and being a failure. If you want to get out of a cave you're living in that is housed in fear, if you want to stop hiding wheat in a wine press, I know I'm using the metaphors from the passage, but if you want to move out of either of those two places, then remember what you're actually capable of. Now here's the deal, when I say that, I know there's some of us in here going, no, not what you're capable of, what God is capable of. But can I read you what God tells him in the next moment? Judges chapter 6, verse 14. And the Lord turned to him, being Gideon, and said, go in this might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. And then God says, do not I send you? Do you know what God's telling him? Gideon, remember your strength. Remember your capability. Remember what's true of you and what you're actually able to do. And then remember that I'm infinitely more capable than all of this, and I'm with you too. It's not one or the other, it's both. Remember, there's a strength I built in you. And friends, the same is true for you, right? He tells Gideon, he's a mighty man of valor. Remember this about yourself. Capture your story. And we would look and we're like, this is pretty impressive. Like an angel of the Lord comes, tells Gideon he's a mighty man of valor to recapture this thing, says, go, he's going to do incredible things like this. If we would probably, most of us would be thinking, this sounds like an open door. This sounds like something that's really clear. This sounds like God showed up and made this like definitively clear, and I'd have confidence now, but apparently talking to an angel of the Lord is not enough to overcome the fear that's inside of Gideon. He's told he's a mighty man of valor, but he's like, I don't know about any of this. I'm not sure you are who you say you are. I'm going to need a sign. I need you to prove it. Right? He tells the angel, first and foremost, because the angel tells him, right, you're a mighty man of valor. Do you know what Gideon's response to that is? Actually, I'm from the weakest clan, and I'm the weakest in my family. That's how he responds. Do you hear the story he's telling about himself? Guys, if God shows up and looks at you and says, oh, mighty person of valor, and your immediate response is, actually, I'm the weakest at everything, like, I just think you should pause and recognize who you're talking to. Like, there's something powerful about that. God shows up and it's like, you're a mighty man of valor. Gideon goes, actually, I'm the weakest from the weakest tribe in the weakest place. And because he just can't get on board with this, he looks at God and he does the thing that we would do in all of these situations. This is what we would do, especially if we know what that pain feels like. If we know what the pain of falling and failing feels like, Gideon looks and he goes, I need to ask you for a sign. I need you to prove it. I need you to make this a certain deal for me, God. That's what I need from you. And so God does. Because after we fail or something fails that mattered to us, and this is key, we want certainty that it won't happen again. Isn't that the real thing that's happening? If you've had a moment where you know the pain of what it is to fail and you know what the pain of what it is to fall, and you're thinking about your life and you're like, I don't want to live in this cave. I don't want to live in avoidance. I don't want to hide from life. But in order for me to do anything, I need the certainty that it's not going to happen again. I need the certainty that whatever this next moment is, it's going to be different than the last moment, and it'll work out the way that I ultimately want it to. Gideon says, I need the certainty. Show me a sign. Judges 6:17, and he said to him, this is what Gideon says, if I have found favor in your eyes, if you're really for me, if you really like me, right? If you're really with me, if I found favor in your eyes, then show me a sign that it's you who speak with me. And Gideon goes and he makes at that time what would have been a very normal offering in the ancient world to appease the gods. Not just in Judaism, like in most ancient cultures. He bakes a stew, he bakes a bread, he does this thing, and he goes and he places all this stuff that he did as like an offering, a tribute, to like earn favor with God. And he puts it on a rock. This isn't just a unique thing he did. This is what people would have done if they're like, I really want God to be happy with me, with whatever gods they were worshiping at that time. So Gideon does this, he places it on the rock. The angel of the Lord shows up and touches it with the end of his staff. And the whole thing bursts into flames and burns up on the rock, and it's just gone. And for the first time in the entire story, Gideon's eyes open and he's like, oh my gosh, this is God. This really is an angel of the Lord. This really is a real moment. This really is, like what he's saying is actually true. He means this, like this is a real thing. He gets the sign he's looking for. He gets the sign he's looking for, and he has this peace now. And we would look at that and we're like, that's amazing, but that's not all. And then in that moment, because he's now going like, I'm a little overwhelmed and don't know what to do, the voice, audible voice of God chimes in and says to him, do not be afraid, you're not going to die. Now that might just be the most critical piece of information that Gideon gets, because what would he be most afraid of with the Midianites? If I go out there, I'm gonna die. If we step into this, if we leave the cave, if we stand up, if we try to do this thing in front of us, I'm gonna die. And God says, do not be afraid, you're not gonna die. The audible voice of God shows up. Are you missing this? The audible voice of God shows up after an angel of the Lord burns up an offering on a rock and is like, here's a sign and you are not going to die. I mean, that sounds like the guarantee that I am looking for, friends. I don't know about you, right? At this moment, you're like, okay, finally, we're going to see Gideon who's like, and then the fear vanished. And with like amazing confidence, Gideon's just going to be like, cool, let's get on my skis. Like, let's go do this thing, right? And it's not what happens. It's actually not. Gideon finds out he's not going to die. And then the very next moment, do you know what happens? Gideon is sneaking around in the dark because he's afraid his family's going to kill him for tearing down the altars of Baal. Here's what God does. God looks at him and he says in Judges chapter 6, verse 27, Gideon took 10 men of his servants, did as the Lord had told him. But because he was too afraid of his family and of the men of the town to do it by day, he did it by night. How much certainty does a person need? Like how much encouragement and how many moments and how many things? It's really difficult, isn't it? Don't judge Gideon though, because we'd be the same way, wouldn't we? I would feel this exact same way. He tells him, I want you to go tear down the altars of Baal, which is this false pagan god that ultimately his family had been worshiping. And God's like, I want to lead you forward. So can we eliminate the distractions and the things in our life? And I want to march this forward. And so Gideon's like, oh gosh, he asked me to do what? And he goes and sneaks in at night because he's worried what's going to happen. He's worried his family's going to kill him, even though God just said, you're not going to die. Do you know how this whole section ends? Chapter 6 ends, and this is where I'm going to end in our passage today. It ends with a really famous story from Gideon. If you ever heard the story of Gideon and the fleece. After all of that, right? After all of that, Gideon goes, I need one more thing, and I need you to give me another sign. And he says, and Gideon's actually the one who goes, and this is the exact sign that I need you to give me. I'm going to lay a fleece out, and I need there not to be water underneath the fleece on the ground and just on the fleece. I want the fleece to be wet in the morning, but not where it's on the ground, because then it would have just soaked it up from the ground. I need to know that this is actually a genuine miracle and a thing. And so God, will you do that? And God does that moment even then too. But do you feel the constant sense of fear? Do you feel the constant need to just be like, I've experienced pain. I've been living in a cave. I know what this is like. I know what it is to fail and fall. And I don't want to feel that thing again. Friends, it is normal when you have failed or when something that you really care about has failed to have a moment in your life where you go through a hard time. It is normal to suddenly feel fear in your life when that happens. Makes you human. To suddenly be like, there's fear there that didn't exist before. It's because you went through a real moment and it had real implications and it hurt, or it was hard, or it was embarrassing, or whatever the word is for you. But in those moments, you get to bring those fears to God. You get to name them. And you get to tell God, I don't want to spend my life living in avoidance. I want to partner with you. So this is me asking for help. And you get to take that first step with him. You know what else is normal? It is normal when you fail at something, or something you care about fails, to lose sight of what it is you're capable of and what God is actually capable of through you. It is. It's a very normal thing to have that for a season of time. But you know what you get to do? You get to pause and remember what God's built up in you. You get to pause and remember all of the things that led to this moment and realize that you can have a moment where you failed, and that's different than being a failure, isn't it, friends? And it's normal to look for certainty. Perhaps this is the most human part of it all. It is normal to look for certainty before you get back on your skis, because falls hurt. And like I said, nobody's a masochist who wants to feel that again. But here's the truth, because I figured I'd get to this spot in the message and people would be like, okay, cool. So what do we do to get out of this? What's the secret? What's the hack for life that fixes all of this? And instead, this entire moment drives to a really difficult but very real truth, and it's this. If you are always waiting for the certainty you are looking for, you will rarely do what it is that you need to do. It's the one thing that I can't give you. If you always are waiting on the certainty that you're looking for, you will rarely do what it is that you need to do. And the reason why is because you are not an infinite being called God. You are a finite being that is a human. And you don't know what the future looks like, and you can't see around every corner. You can't predict how people are going to behave at every turn. You can't ensure that you will never make a mistake because you're not perfect, just like the rest of us. You cannot guarantee that tomorrow will occur the way that you have predisposed it to be because you are a human. You're not God. And so the reality is you never get the kind of certainty that you ultimately want to move in the way that's yours to move. And yet, there's still faith, and there's still trust, and there's still a way forward. I started getting to the ski hill early. Excuse me, and I would do a few runs by myself, just trying to warm up. And then I would go, what I was really doing was trying to get a bunch of certainty by scouting the mountain. I would go up and be like, so I need perfect conditions. I need to make sure that there's no icy sheets or spots that I would slip on or that would happen. I need to make sure that they didn't groom it weird last night and there's not some new bump that I didn't know about. I need to make sure that there's not very many people out there that would, essentially be in my way that I might hit or cause me to veer off course. I need to make sure that the snow's right and that there hasn't been anything pushed around. I need to be certain that all of these things are in place because I convinced myself, you guys, if I just had enough certainty, if I could just guarantee all these things, then I can do it. I'm going to go. It's going to be great. To the degree that I even started being and the only time that I should do this is between 10:30 and 11 a.m. when the Arizona snow has been just warm enough to melt what can be a little icy in the morning, but not hot enough that it's created slush and stuff. I also need it to be right then because not enough skiers and boarders have been around to push snow into piles and things because then it'll be groomed perfect and be right there. And when everything is certain and perfect and the magical moment occurs, then I'll go. And one day it was. Literally one day when I went skiing, all of that was true. And I got on the lift and I went to the top and I'm telling myself, this is true and this is true and here's all the things and this is the magical moment and everything is certain and I can guarantee. And I went up to the top of the hill and I pushed myself off of it and I awkwardly skidded my way down the hill like I didn't know how to ski. Because it's just not enough. Because I still didn't know, well, what if it changed? What if something was around the corner? What if there was something I couldn't see? And I made my way all the way down to the bottom and I was a little bit frustrated and I was kind of disappointed because it really was a perfect moment and everything was there. And I got on the lift and there was this gentleman who got on with me and it was just me and him. And he's in his mid-70s and I was like, how cool that this guy's out here skiing all the time in his mid-70s. And I said, hey man, how many days a year do you get? And he's like, this is my 60th day this year. I was like, that's incredible. I wish I could ski 60 days a year. I live in Tucson. And he said, yeah, it's nice to live up here. And I was like, very cool. And I said, so I thought about myself for a moment and I said, so do you ever have close calls or something, especially being in your 70s? I don't heal the way that I used to in my 20s now, and I imagine that's a little bit different. Do you ever have close calls in this? And he goes, oh yeah, every year. It's just a part of the deal. And I was like, what do you do with all that? And he just looked and he was like, well, I just don't focus on it. I was like, well, that sounds easy. Thanks, appreciate your advice. But he's like, I just don't focus on it. And he told me because the truth of the matter is any day that I get to be out here is just another day that I get to be doing something I love. And so I keep choosing that instead of worrying about the rest of it. That hit me. That actually hit me differently. And I was like, wow, that's really amazing. And then he turned into Yoda on the chairlift. And he said one phrase to me that I will remember for the rest of my life. And he just said, after all, there's a difference between trying not to fall and skiing. They're not the same thing. And I immediately was like, okay. That actually clicked with me. Do you know what I'd been doing for a year? I hadn't been trying to ski. I'd just been trying not to get hurt again. And those were not the same thing at all. And there was something about that breathed life and a little bit of courage into me. And I got off the lift and I said, nice to meet you. And I skied away to him and I went up to the top of the run and I didn't pause and I didn't really think about it and I just went right over the edge and I skied fast and it was so fun and I just felt joy and goodness and it was like I remembered what I loved again, and I did not hit 60 miles an hour. It's okay, I still haven't hit 60 miles an hour. Maybe this will be my year. Maybe you'll see me in crutches. I have no idea, right? But it tethered my heart back into what I cared about and what I love in a way that ultimately that's what matters in the first place. I still have a goal. I still have a passion. But God's doing something. I reminded me of what I'm capable of in this really, really beautiful way. Excuse me. I know that I'm talking about skiing, but can I tell you in the same exact way I've seen this play out in my life? In relationships, in parenting, in moments where I have felt hurt, in moments where I have failed and gotten stuck. And I felt this come back to life in so many different ways. And the truth is, this is always the way forward. Friends, failures and setbacks are hard. Moving forward after one happens can be even harder. But I just want to take this final moment with you to remind you, you are not created to live your life in a cave of avoidance. It's not who you are. It's not what this thing is. This is your life, this precious gift that you hold right now, this thing that you're operating in and moving through. It is your one and only life. You are the most capable version of you that has ever existed on this planet. And so if a moment of failure has come to define you as a failure, if fear has begun to creep inside of your heart, here's the truth. You will never have the kind of certainty that you're looking for to ensure that you will not fall, fail, or get hurt again. But that's not how life works anyway. God is right there in this thing with you right now. He is leading you forward. He has made you. He has shaped you. He has led you. He has guided you. You are you because of all that he has put inside of you. And we call it walking by faith for a reason, don't we? Because that's what you have. You get a profound moment right here and right now to choose to trust in the God of the universe who sees around the corners that you don't. Who doesn't guarantee that you will not hurt or fail. After all, even his own son hurt and had hardships and pain in all of those moments, right? Knows what those moments are like, knows what it is to get knocked down. But that he's with you and you can trust him for that, to be God so that you can be a human being. He will see what you can't so that you can find the courage to get back up on your skis. And I leave you with this. After all, there is a difference between trying not to fail and trying not to fall and living your life, isn't there?